While it's practically guaranteed that by now you've heard of the Nerf Pig meme and still hear it to this day, there's another meme in a very similar vein that's been practically lost to time. Before Behaviour decided that poor Amanda is destined to be public enemy number 1 and then launched a multiple year-long attack of nerfs so intense that her reputation is completely ruined to this day. In fact, before the pig was even in the game, someone, or should I say something else, held the title of the Nerf meme, but for a completely different reason to the pig, and that something is FireUp. Our story starts all the way back in patch 1.8.0 on the 26th of October 2017 with the release of Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street chapter. Of course, it's no secret that this chapter was an absolute shambles, with the weakest killer in DBD history, the ugliest survivor in DBD history, and various controversies. But this video isn't about Freddy, rather his perks. Every character comes with 3 teachable perks, with Freddy's being Blood Warden, Remember Me, and FireUp. Remember Me was initially very popular and saw a lot of use as what was effectively a slowdown perk, but instead of slowing gens, it slowed down the door opening speed. Either way, it kept survivors in the match for longer, so close enough. Although it took a while, its usage did eventually fall off, thanks to a nerf reducing how much it slows the gates by, and then a second nerf that makes the obsession completely immune to its effects. Since then, it's had its slowdown increased again multiple times, but it's still far too risky of a perk due to it potentially having literally zero effect whatsoever if the obsession is still alive. Blood Warden had a very strong debut as many players didn't know about it and ended up getting caught off guard and being blocked in. While survivors very quickly learned to play around it via 99%ing the gates, it still does see semi-regular use to this day, although very rarely coming into effect outside of meme builds like the nurse going AFK behind the exit gates until endgame, then attempting to win the match entirely with 0 gens remaining. And then there was FireUp, a perk so weak that almost everyone in the community forgot it existed practically the day it released. Seriously, you'd think that Freddy only came with 2 perks considering how little anybody spoke about it. So what did it do? Just like its modern day version, it would buff all of your action speeds, ramping up in intensity as more generators get completed. Actions being basically anything that locks you in an animation, unable to move. This means faster pallet breaking speed, faster gen kicking speed, faster vault speed, and faster pickup and drop speed. On paper, this is an amazing perk. Stacking FireUp's faster pallet break speed with brutal strength was no doubt everybody's first thought. And in even bigger news, it was the first ever killer perk in DBD history to increase your vaulting speed. But in reality, FireUp was absolutely awful, not really kicking in until the game was practically over and doing almost nothing even when it was fully charged. The original version of FireUp worked on a token system instead of today's stacking system, with each gen that pops granting you 1 token. 1 token gave you nothing. Okay, so at the start of the match, FireUp did nothing, and after the first gen popped, it still gave you nothing. 2 tokens gave you 10% faster action speed. Nice! This is a decent starting point. If the increments stay like this, we might have something worth using. 3 tokens gave you 12% faster action speed. So our speed is going to be increasing in precise increments of fuck all. 4 tokens gave you 14% faster action speed, and 5 tokens gave you nothing once again. So realistically, FireUp did nothing for half the match, and when it finally kicked in, it amounted to nothing more than a weaker version of Brutal Strength. Of course, when it first released, people had the bright idea of pairing the only vault speed perk with the only vault speed killer, who was Myers at the time, for synergy, but quickly gave up when they saw that FireUp just didn't really add anything of value. What was the point in using something that provided no value when you could use something that provides lots of value? Like today's sponsor, Surfshark. Keep yourself safe online with Surfshark's suite of privacy-enhancing tools like Alternative ID, which allows you to generate alternative phone numbers, email addresses, and entire personas so you can sleep easy knowing that no websites are leaking your private information in data breaches since they never had your real details to begin with. The protection doesn't stop there, as it also includes my personal favorite feature, Clean Web, which gives you a built-in ad blocker blocker that also stops websites from tracking you and blocks those annoying pop-ups on every website asking you about cookies, which even works on phones too. That's right, ad block on your phone. Of course, not forgetting the most famous feature, the Surfshark VPN, which masks your IP address to prevent DDoS attacks and allows you to spoof your location, getting you better deals on flights, hotels, and even gives you access to more films and shows on Netflix as certain shows are hidden from certain countries. Like Shaun of the Dead, a literal British classic and staple of many family get-togethers, is blocked in Netflix in England. With Surfshark, I can change my location to Canada and watch away. With support for unlimited devices and a 30-day money-back guarantee, secure your online activity now by going to surfshark.com/Ardetha for an exclusive deal, giving you the best possible price on the market and an additional 4 months extra. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. While the overwhelming majority of the community quickly disregarded FireUp, and quite rightly so, not everybody was ready to give up on it just yet. You see, unlike other trash tier perks like Territorial Imperative, which were just completely terrible in both idea and execution, completely beyond saving without a complete replacement effect, FireUp was quite the opposite. Yes, FireUp was absolutely awful too, so they did have that in common, but making it a good perk was actually very simple. A simple increase in numbers would easily make it worthwhile. Outside of its strength, or lack thereof, the general idea of the perk was very unique and interesting. The idea of gradually getting more powerful as the match progresses was captivating, and it allowed for many potential synergies, like the previously mentioned Brutal Strength or Freddy's other perks, keeping the survivors trapped in the match when you're at your strongest. But that was just potential. With its current numbers, it was still an absolutely awful perk. But due to that perfect combination of being both weak and interesting, it became a go-to meme perk whenever playing as the usual culprits like Sharp Hand Joe and Bubba, but also got used when memeing on any other killer. While FireUp was initially completely forgotten about, it slowly but surely started to creep its way onto people's radars. Not due to any buffs or new strategies people found with it, no. It purely earned a reputation as the meme perk that people only use because it's funny how badly behavior blundered a genuinely good idea. Of course, whenever a memeing killer won, it was clearly only for one reason: FireUp carrying them. Because of course, FireUp is literally the strongest perk ever made. It clearly needs a nerf. And thus, GG Nerf FireUp was born. Not because it found itself getting nerfed a million times like the pig did, but because it was so weak that players would sarcastically claim that it's OP, perhaps even hoping that if it was mocked hard enough for long enough, maybe the devs would eventually buff it. Don't forget, this was old behavior we're talking about here. Unless they had a serious kick up the arse from the community, they were not going to do anything. Most of the time they still wouldn't do anything even if they did get a kick up the arse, but you get the point. So in the meantime, GG Nerf FireUp would live on, serving as a constant staple of meme and troll builds, with the levels of both irony and sarcasm eventually soaring so high that players wouldn't just say to nerf FireUp if the killer won, but also if the killer lost. But by some kind of miracle, in record speed by behavior standards back then, FireUp would receive a much needed change. A year and a half after FireUp's release, in the PTB for patch 2.6.0 on the 6th of March 2019, FireUp would receive a change. Nerf changed FireUp's functionality from a token system to a stacking system. Each stack grants 3% action speed bonus. In a move that genuinely nobody could have predicted, behavior actually went and nerfed FireUp. Don't get me wrong, they already had a reputation for nerfing some of the already weakest things in the game, but that normally only happened as a knee-jerk reaction a month or two after release, not an entire year and a half later. Now, that being said, it's worth noting that the devs thought they were buffing FireUp with this change, since the perk would now max out at 15% action speed bonus instead of the previous 14, which was literally indiscernible. But due to the new stacking system with the perk now maxing out after all 5 gens have popped instead of the previous 4, you'd now have to lose more gens to get the same benefit as before. Commence a new avalanche of FireUp memes. Despite the fact that this PTB literally included an entire new chapter, being the Plague, the backlash about the FireUp nerf was severe enough that they couldn't just leave it in that state. So, 2 weeks later when the patch went onto live servers, FireUp had been changed once again. Buff. Each stack now grants 4% action bonus, maxing out at 20%. Okay, now FireUp had actually received a buff. A tiny one mind you, but still a buff nonetheless. That being said, the change was still too small to actually have any impact, and FireUp still remained as a weak perk. At this point in time there was Bamboozle now, so at least there's even more opportunity for synergy alongside Brutal Strength. But again, outside of full W key meme builds, Fire Up still saw no unironic use. But Fire Up slowly began to lose its meme status regardless, partially because it wasn't as aggressively dog shit as it used to be, but mainly because a new victim had taken the spotlight. The pig. I've already made an entire video on the torment behaviour of Put That Poor Lady Through, but one thing's for sure, the devs had a serious vendetta against that character and nerfed her an insane amount of times. This very quickly shifted people's association of the word nerf from GG nerf Fire Up to nerf pig. But don't get me wrong, Fire Up was still a bad perk, and it would stay that way for a very long time. It wouldn't be until an almighty 5 years and 8 months later, on the 8th of January 2025 in patch 8.5.0, when Fire Up would receive a new change. Buff increased each stack to 6% action speed instead of the previous 4%. And with that buff of 2% per stack, Fire Up went from being a bad perk to a genuinely solid perk. With so many more perks to synergize with, like Dark Arrogance and Superior Anatomy, alongside serviceable numbers by itself without the addition of other supplementary perks, Fire Up has finally found itself in a decent spot. It may have taken about 8 years, but the perk finally found itself in the position it should have released in all those years ago. Although, the buff wasn't done just because Fire Up was bad, instead acting as an extension of the recent Freddy rework, which released on the same day.